I love this picture here, even though it's kind of depressing. Simply states, how do you see yourself and why? Now I'm going to show you exactly why you see yourself the way you see yourself. Good, positive, or indifferent. It has to do with something called the imprint period. We talked a little bit about that before, but I really want to dive into it now. The imprint period is when 80% of your personality is formed. This is a rarely known psychological fact, hard to find in the literature actually, but it's there. And your personality is formed, who you are, between the ages of when you're born to somewhere around 5 or 7 years old. During the imprint period, you have a boatload of questions. Little kids, you know, they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. Why this? Why that? Why? You'll give an answer, and they'll say, well, you think the answer's over, and they'll go, well, why? And you'll say, well, because, and they'll go, well, why that? And you go, well, because, why that? And at some point, they'll almost drive you nuts till you realize, Jesus, I thought I understood this until you asked me 6 different questions about it. Maybe I'm dumber than a 4-year-old. It's when 80% of your personality gets locked in because you ask questions, but you do not question the answers. You take everything in. It's that garbage in, garbage out that we talked about earlier. So you're not questioning the answers. If I tell you something, you believe it. Steve Martin had a great joke. He said, want to play a neat trick on a 3-year-old? Here's a great thing. Show him a pen, hold it up, and say, banana. Show him the pen, say banana. Show him the pen, say banana. Then when the kid goes to school, he's going to say, hey, this thing isn't working. Does anybody have a banana? Anybody here got a banana? And somebody's going to hand him a banana, and he's like, no, I would like a banana. How am I going to write with that yellow thing? Now, it's a funny joke, but that's what happens. We believe what everybody tells us, and we absorb it. We can't. Our brain physically doesn't have the mechanism to screen out false information. It doesn't even have the mechanism yet. It's not fully developed yet. You know your brain's not fully developed until you're 21 years old? And the last intellectual function that happens is judgment and critical thinking. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It's the last thing to fully develop. Wow. That's why you make so many bad decisions up until 21. And from lack of experience, a little bit past that. So the imprint period locks in about 80% of your personality. Now, in the years after that, guess what? What is the other 20% based on? It's based on the original premises of the 80%, your foundational belief systems. So the remaining 20% ends up looking a lot like the other 80%. So you could make an argument that during this imprint period and shortly thereafter, about 95 to 98% of your personality is locked in. These are not great numbers. So I show you this trap so you can understand that 98% of what you believe, you never actually decided to believe. You were programmed to believe. You then supported it. You got that confirmation bias that we talked about earlier. And you defended these beliefs that, hello, they're not yours. Now, quick question for you. Do you drive your thoughts, or do your thoughts drive you? Which one do you think it is? This is a great question to ask. And are you sure? They actually did a study, and what it was an electrical pulse that they put in your arm. And what you would do is you would decide which arm you were going to move, okay? And then I would jolt, say, your right arm that had the electrical pad on it. And that would make you say, reach over and grab the cup, okay? Now, even though I had chosen for you, you know, half the time you were probably going to grab it with that right hand. The other half the time you were going to grab it with the left. But because I hit you with that little jolt, you moved the right hand when you were going to move the left. You know what people will say? They say, you know what? I was going to go with my left hand, but at the last second, right before you jolted me, I decided to go with my right hand. Do you know what actually happened there? Do you see it? The mind didn't decide to do it. The jolt made you do it. And then your brain covered it up by saying, oh yeah, I decided to do that. I was just about to do that before you hit the damn button. So I chose that, you didn't. No. This is how your brain gives you the illusion of choice even when you don't have it. That experiment was the scariest thing I ever saw in psychology, because it tells us that we have a very, very difficult time even understanding when we choose to do something and when we don't. That usually it's our unconscious mind. So in the study that they did, what they decided was your unconscious mind, as opposed to your conscious mind, will actually decide what to do. Your conscious mind will just kind of speak it out verbally, if it even does that, or it'll just do it mindlessly, and give you the sense that you actually chose that. Say you're walking down your driveway and you're going to go for a walk today. And you're trying to decide, well, it's just as nice to go left as it is to go right for a little walk today. And what you'll do is you'll go back and forth in your mind, and you'll hear yourself just trying to pick which way to go and why, and you'll make a decision. According to this study, that was already chosen. Your unconscious mind can do 200,000 transactions in the time it takes your mind to do one. So the theory is that most of the things that you do are unconscious. You then rethink about them and come up with the exact same decision your unconscious mind would have came up with, and you do that thing. And most of the things you do, somewhere around the 95th percentile or higher, are unconscious anyways. Grabbing a cup of coffee. You decide you want the cup of coffee, but it's your unconscious mind that knows how to reach over, how to grasp it, how to balance it, how to sip it, how to drink it, how to swallow it, how to digest it, and how to poop it back out. You just thought coffee. You did one thing, and your unconscious mind had to do hundreds of thousands of mental calculations and transactions to make all that happen. So we think that we do most of the thinking in our lives when we only do the tiniest fraction. So the ego almost works like the unconscious mind. It's this part of our brain, a small part, which is a fiction, that is trying to direct our lives. And it can if we allow it. When we separate from it, when we watch the thinker and we begin to separate from it, we stop listening to it, and we, the real us, actually starts deciding. Then we start driving our thoughts instead of the ego driving our thoughts and the unconscious driving our thoughts. We are regaining control, and that is a beautiful thing. You have just broken out of your prison. You're doing fantastic. Keep going. Now I'm going to show you an interesting thing about your brain. Look at this brain. I'm going to tell you two things about it. One, look at all these different things going on. This is a pretty sick individual. This is like a mental health patient. Now I'm going to tell you the second thing. This is an average person. An average person has all these same thoughts. What's the difference between a mental patient and a quote-unquote normal person? It's the length and the severity of it. It's the intensity of it. It's how often they'll think about, say, a fear. So a paranoid person thinks about fear all day long. We might spend 10, 15 minutes a day thinking about things that we're worried or afraid about. They spend all day doing it. So it's not that the mental patient and the healthy patient are wildly different. It's how much time they spend on it. So what I want you to do is, as you're noticing these things come up, here's how you gain emotional freedom and free yourself from the thinker, the ego. The ego wants to stay on these things. When it gets fearful, it wants to stay on them for a long time. You know, it wants to focus on doubt and the guilt and the neurosis and the resentment and the past and the future and the envy and the worry and the remorse and the pettiness, and stay there for long periods of time. Whereas an intelligent person could say, hey, I'm afraid this might happen. And your brain would say, okay, so Paul, what would you like to do about that? And you'd immediately go into the solution. You know what your ego does? Worries about it some more, worries about it some more. It thinks it's planning or doing something, but it's almost like when you sit there and you listen to somebody bitch. They think bitching and whining and complaining is the same thing as actually doing something. When you hear this from the outside, you go, oh my God, this is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard, and I know this person's never going to get out of this situation. Why? Because they think whining, bitching, and complaining is the same as doing something. I used to have a sign over my desk. It said, any fool can whine, bitch, and complain. and most fools do. If you're whining, bitching, and complaining, you're a fool. Don't do it. Now, we all do the same thing when we let fear or doubt or guilt or resentment run over and over and over in our mind. So here's how I got very mentally healthy. I listened to my mind, I listened to my ego, and I shut it down quick. Something would come in my mind and it would raise a fear, a doubt, or concern, and I would hear it and I'd listen to it once, and I'd listen to it twice, and I'd listen to it 3 times. 3 times is now a pattern, and I'd say, well, let's go on to the solution. And if my mind didn't let me, then I knew I was in a neurotic pattern, a negative pattern of thinking that's hurting me, and I would stop it. So the difference between the old me, when I used to listen to the ego, is it would go on and on and on for hours, days, weeks. The difference is now, not that I don't have these feelings, I do have the fear and the doubt and the guilt, I just shut it down so much quicker. In minutes, not hours, months, days, and years. In minutes, sometimes in seconds. That's what I want you to do. And when you separate from your ego, you'll be able to shut these things down fast. Notice them. Notice you're spending too much time on them. Stop, focus on the solution, or simply let it go out of your mind. So I leave you with this final thought. Your mind can be a really bad neighborhood, okay? Make sure you clean it up. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. This also has to do with recycling garbage. You don't want to stir up fear, doubt, resentment. When you hear it repeating, stop it and focus on the solution, or just let it go. Knock it down quick. Catch it, knock it down. Catch it, knock it down. Catch it, shut it down fast. Don't let it loop and loop and loop. That's insane. You know, I've seen some good movies in my time, but I wouldn't go watch, the latest, greatest movie and then sit through it again, and then sit through it again, and then sit through it again, and then sit through it again 30, 40 times. But we'll do this on a regular basis inside our mind. Not the way to go. Shut it down quick, shut it down fast, get rid of it. Now finally, remember, 90% of all thinking is negative, neurotic, repetitive, and wasteful. You need to get out of it. So, catch it, stop it. And I gave you a quote, I think I gave you a quote earlier. It said, don't hold on to any thought which isn't joyful and peaceful. If it's not making you feel better, if it's not helping in your life, if it's not helpful in any way, shape, or form, let it go. Hold on to that philosophy. If you only get one thing out of this course, if it's not bringing me peace or joy, get rid of it. It has no value. Get rid of it. It is literally killing you, and it's sucking up your life.